Hi, welcome to Fiberchats. My name is Irina. I'm the host here, and my guest today is Mr. Smith. Hello. Hi, Gary. Well, I've been following you for quite a while, and it's your account is just something that you don't see much. Basically, it's like you're taking a painting, which you do. You draw your own things. You paint something, and then you turn that poster into something wearable. So this is like by definition, basically wearable art, which is one of the hashtags I like to use. How and when did you start knitting?
I started knitting, I think I would have been about 4 or 5, and I don't remember starting knitting. And I think I was taught by my mum and my grandmother, who were both brilliant knitters, and my mum still is. My mum's still knitting every day, and but I don't really remember. I do remember when I was a child knitting little scarves for toys, that sort of thing, just sort of plain knitting.
Do you remember what your mom and your grandma were knitting at the time?
At the time, well, this would have been about 19. I mean, this would have been at the time when it was that crossover, when people were still buying yarn to make clothes for the children to go to school. You know, you know, before it became cheaper to buy a jumper, it was cheaper to buy the yarn then and knit something yourself than it was to go and buy the jumper. So they were still doing that sort of stuff, but they would be doing lots of baby knitting, because I was the eldest of 5, so my mum would have been doing lots of baby knitting. But by the 80s, I suppose late 80s, as soon as the Row and K Facet stuff was coming out, my mum was knitting all of the big coats that K Facet, was really complex technical stuff. So she was quite capable of knitting all of that. So all of my sisters have Rowan coats, and they still have them from the first few Rowan books. Yeah. So
were your siblings knitting as well?
I've got a younger brother, Paul, and I like to think that well, I like to say that he went over to the dark side because he's a crocheter. Right. So he and it's a really weird thing, because I'm trying to get him I'm trying to interview him to sort of find out what happened, why all of a sudden because I don't know when he started crocheting, but I'm assuming he would have, you know, done it very early as well, same as me. But it's strange that I knit and he crochets. And then I've got 3 other sisters, and I believe only one of them knits, but she's big on knitting and she knits all the time. But I think the other 2 sisters, they don't really knit, as far as I'm aware anyway.
Right. So do you remember like when you tried to combine art and knitting?
When I was 16, I lived in a place called Southend-on-Sea, and I went to the art college there, and I was forced to specialise. I was doing what was called a general art and design course, and I was forced to specialise, and I specialised in fashion and textiles. So for a year I did fashion and textiles, and knitting was a part of that. But I think they were keener on knitting machines than they were on hand knitting. But I started to do a little bit there. But it's when I went away. I went away when I was 18. I went to university, and I went to Chelsea in London. And my uni was like on the King's Road at Chelsea. And but I was living in Battersea in the art student halls, and it was the art student halls for the whole of London. So there were fashion students from Central St Martin's that were my friends, and there were people that were doing hand knitting. So I was, at that point, I really got into it. So I'm at Chelsea. I'm 18. I'm studying fine art painting at Chelsea, and I'm meant to be painting, and I'm spending a lot of time, well, I am painting, but I'm spending a lot of time learning to knit as well. And the real catalyst was Martin Kidman, because the Martin Kidman stuff was coming out. He was doing hand knits for Joseph. I don't know if you know those,
Right.
but amazing, absolutely amazing stuff. And I really wanted one of those, but of course they were a fortune.
Right.
And the Joseph shop was in Sloane Street, just down from Harrods, you know, and it's just, I mean, the price tags were huge. But I wanted to learn to knit, to be able to knit a Martin Kidman jumper. So that's when I really invested the time. So that's really when I tried, and they were all picture knits, and you know, not a million miles away from the sort of stuff that I do now. So yeah.
How did you learn? Because back then there wasn't YouTube, there wasn't all the online resources you can find now. What was the learning process like? How did you find resources?
Well, as you say, there wasn't anything. There were books. Obviously, I had my mum, but I wasn't at home, and my mum was capable of doing it. And I think I'd go home at the weekends and she'd give me tips. Yeah, what I was producing at the time was dreadful. You know, there were holes in everything, and the tension was bad, and you know, the floats on the back, they were just like these massive long floats, and you know, everything's just a mess really, but just trial and error, I suppose. And
I mean, you are like well known right now for your technique with the floats, so you don't have floats basically. Like if you look at the back of your fabric, there is no float.
Shall I show you? I'll just pick something at random. So obviously this is the light's terrible here. So it's like a fairisle
right
on the front, and then inside it looks as if there aren't any floats. There are floats, they're just one stitch long though. So it's just that I knit every stitch, I knit it in. And I started doing that. I remember going home from university one weekend, and I think my mum said, you should be knitting your ends in as you go along, so you don't have to darn them at the end of your projects. And she showed me how to weave the ends in as I knitted. And so once I learned that, I thought, well, why can't I do that for my fairisle knits? And so I tried to do it, and I found that as soon as I did that, everything just sort of fell into place. You know, my tension, everything looked, you know, everything was great. Everything was, you know, that was a eureka moment for me when I tried to knit color work with that darning process. But obviously I've learned subsequently, that there are lots of people, and historically there are people all over the world that do that sort of thing. So it's not like I'm the only person that does it, and lots of people do it. Yeah.
You know what, sometimes I wonder sometimes in knitting, like there seems to be techniques that like would make everybody's life much easier, and yet they're not universal techniques. They're not like that every knitter does it that way. Like there is a lot of different approaches to fairisle, right? You have the rules of like every 5 to 6 stitches. Some people do it every 2 to 3 stitches. Do you get into conversation about that with like other fairisle knitters?
I don't really. I don't believe there are any rules in knitting. I think that it's what works for you as an individual. So you know, I wouldn't tell anyone to do anything a certain way. I think that yeah, if a certain method works for you, then that's great. It's just that, you know, I tried those. You know, I tried every 6 stitches or every 4 stitches or 3 stitches. I tried all of that, and I just found that for me, every 1 stitch worked. So Yeah.
Let's talk about yarn selection. So back in your student days, I imagine the budget wasn't there for the best quality yarn or the vast amount of yarn. How did your stash change over the years?
Pretty much my stash has been built up secondhand a lot of the time. And so, you know, it's something like this that I was showing you earlier. It's got lots and lots of colors in, and so I can use tiny little, like, you know, what my mum was throwing away. Well, she wouldn't be throwing it away, but what was left over from her projects. So that's where my stash building started, really, with my mum. Probably I got a lot of stuff that was left over from her projects, and then I would go to what we call over here charity shops. I think they thrift shops in, right. Yeah, that sort of thing. So, and over the years, that's what's developed. And I'm looking at, you can't see here, but in front of me, I've got baskets of yarn. And they're all just odd colors. You know, quite often I'll go and just buy, and a lot of it's like vintage. I don't know, you can see that, that's quite an old one there. But yeah, just built it up over the years. And when I started, I was quite indiscriminate. So I was buying chunky yarns and I might be buying something that was nylon or acrylic because I wanted the color, but now, of course, it's pretty much natural fibers.
How do you decide on which colors you're going to use for any particular project?
What I usually do at the beginning of a project is I throw everything. I get a basket, a big basket. And I've been using baskets for years, actually, because you can like see them all together rather than a bag, because once they're in the bag, they're all mixed up. So if you've got a basket like that, I don't know if you can see it, and I chuck all the colours into those so that I can see what I've got to look at. And then obviously I will put those colours into a bag. So I'll have maybe half a dozen different colours that I know I want to use coming up into a bag. And then, you know, if I'm at work and during my lunch break I'm knitting, I've got my current colours, but I will have a basket full, and I might use them all, I might not, but generally I choose the colours for those types of projects line by line. So I don't plan very much at all. You know, each row I might, because I'm changing colors on something like that, that might have, say, 50 colors in.
Right.
So I'm changing color probably every 2 or 3 rows. I'm changing one or other of the colors.
So recently you started the YouTube channel with Mrs. Smith together, and one of the last episodes I've seen, you mentioned that you might have like north of 30 projects at any given time. How do you decide what you're gonna, like, you wake up in the morning, how do you decide what you're gonna work on that particular day?
I think I do have 30 on the go, but a lot of those will be experimental things. So I might just be swatching, but then what I'll do is I'll start a swatch. I'm trying to find it here amongst it. There's lots of stuff here that I'm looking at, but I will start to knit a swatch, and then I will reuse that swatch and knit something else on top of it and carry on. So I'll build up a swatch. How do I decide? Well, there's usually something that I want to finish, and more recently, I mean, at the moment, because of my YouTube channel, I'm doing 2 projects on there at the same time. So I'm doing a picture knit, which is a baby blanket, which is one of my baby blankets, which is just a standard 2-color thing that I do. So there's 2 different streams to my knitting. One is picture knits, and the other is fairisle knitting. So the fairisle stuff, generally I call it off-piste. So I'm knitting without a pattern, there's no chart, I make it up as I go along. And then I knit the picture knits where I actually make a chart. So I do a drawing, make a chart, and then turn that into the knit. So yeah, there's two different streams of my knitting. How do I decide what I'm working on? Well, at the moment, I'm trying, because I've got the YouTube channel, it's pretty definite what I've got to work on, because people are expecting, I think, week on week that I'm going to progress those projects. So that helps me focus a little bit. But at the same time, there are other things that behind the scenes I'm still experimenting.
Does the YouTube channel stress you at all? The fact that you have to come up with the progress for the next time and what to talk about the next time?
It's early days. I've not found that I've had a problem thinking about what to talk about, because I get so many questions that I can always just talk about the questions. The problems arising, I think, with, say, for instance, this one, which is my off-piste, my current off-piste fairisle knitting, is that because, I mean, I know you'll understand this, that because I'm editing video, I'm making video, I'm editing video, you know, those sorts of things, they take more time than I was expecting. So if I'm putting out a video every week, which I am, it doesn't give me a lot of time for knitting. It's actually reduced my knitting time right down. I'm working on two projects at the same time. Fortunately, at the moment, the other project that I'm working on is a baby blanket, which is just a two-color baby blanket with a picture of a hare across it. That's only at the drawing stage. So I don't know what it's going to be like when I start when I've got two knitted things going on at the same time. So there might be a bit of competition there. I don't know. I'll have to answer that one in the future, because I don't really know. But at the moment, I'm not too pressured. But I do feel that, you know, only doing 5 rows in a week probably isn't enough. But then maybe doing one new YouTube episode a week's probably too much, really, and that might not be sustainable. So I might have to, you know, do one every fortnight or whatever.
What made you decide to start a YouTube channel? Was it those questions that kept on popping and you just decided to show it?
Yeah, well, yeah, you're right. What happened was, I think when you asked me to come and do this, I don't think I probably even had a pattern out at that time, because it was only like, I think it was like the autumn of last year that I put out my first pattern, and that was because, well, I was quite happy going along, but because of on Instagram, people were saying, oh, we really like that pattern. And so I decided to, which was this one. I don't know if you can see it. Can you see that? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So that was my bluebird baby blanket. And so that was the first pattern. And at the time, I thought, because everyone's saying, oh, you put it on Ravelry, and I'm a little bit of a technophobe. So I didn't really want to put it on Ravelry. So I just did it as a poster print. So I just got 50 posters made up, but they sold out really quickly. But then a lot of people were saying to me, I'm never going to be able to knit it because I'm not at that level of competence. I wish I was competent enough to knit it, but I'll buy that poster and I'll put it on the wall. So I was starting to sell posters to people that wanted, that people were aspiring. And I thought to myself, well, I'm sure if you can knit, you know, it's not you know, there are techniques that you could use to bring you up to a level where you could knit that. So that's why I started the YouTube channel, really, because you know, otherwise there were a limited number of people that I could sell my patterns to. I thought the more people that the better people can knit, the more people that can knit this way, the more patterns I could potentially sell. So
I actually really like that way of thinking, because like by educating more people about what you do, you're creating bigger market for yourself. Like it pays in multiple ways for you. Like not only you share your knowledge, but it also creates a bigger market.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
When you draw, there is almost this like naive sort of fairy tale feel to your paintings.
Yeah.
And you sort of coming back, there is always flowers or hairs or the birds and little girl or the angel on the back of the hair. Like, do you see yourself experimenting with like other kinds of art? So is that your signature style and you want to create different, like neat but with the same paintings?
I think because obviously, you know, I'm coming at this from the perspective of a fine artist, but in my day job, I also illustrate. So, and I find that the artists and the illustrators, well, usually the artists and the illustrators that I like artists that are illustrators and illustrators that are artists. I like people that sit on that fence and cross over that. So they're the people that I like. In the past, I used to do seascapes and almost abstract paintings in the past, but yeah, I found that I think there's a much more of a crossover now between what I paint and I draw and what I knit. They're almost becoming one,
right?
If that makes sense. They you know, they in the past knitting was separate to my art, and now I think that they are one and the same. So
how do those ideas pop into your head? Like, is it like you're sleeping and you're dreaming of hairs, or you're walking outside with grandkids and the ideas are born? Like, how those ideas come to you?
Well, I you know, I do, because the artists and illustrators that I like would have that sort of stuff going on in their books and in their paintings, but I don't, you know, necessarily just you know, borrow that, but yeah, I suppose it's just that works well in knitting, those or my style of knitting, that those images have sort of come to the fore in my knitting, because you know, they translate for me, but obviously the translating part of it, the breaking it down, because you know, when you come to knit something that's quite complex, you have to really you have to take away as much detail as you can. So, you know, I might start looking at a very, you know, beautiful painting of a, you know, a bluebird or something, and then I have to, you know, I have to really get it down to, you know, it almost like its purest form, because you know, otherwise the needles and the yarn that I'd be using would be so small if I wanted to have any sort of form of detail. So I have to kind of reduce the detail right out of it.
Well, so you do a lot of vests, you do a lot of baby blankets.
Yeah.
How, like, let's say you drew a painting, right? So there is flowers, there is a bird in it.
Yeah.
How do you decide what kind of article you're going to make with that painting? Because you can just take those flowers and make a headband or a hat or gloves or anything. Like, you can take any little segment of that painting and turn it into something else. How much do you feel like you utilize those paintings into patterns that you're producing?
Well, I think with the baby blankets, because in the last 7 years, I've had 7 grandchildren. So that's the reason, because I want to give them something, sort of an heirloom. And so they're heirloom projects, you know, so that they've got something that, you know, that they'll have throughout their life that I made for them. So that's the idea behind the baby blankets when I started doing those. Vests I make because that's what I would wear. I would wear a vest. And that's because I'm sort of very sort of traditional and a bit, you know, kind of English, I suppose. Although I had a question last week because my wife, she doesn't actually own any of my knitting. Her sister does, strangely. Her sister's got quite a collection of my knitting, but my wife doesn't wear or own any of my knitting. And somebody said, wouldn't she like a shawl? Well, I've never knit a shawl because I'd never wear a shawl. I might wear a scarf, you know, but I wouldn't wear a shawl. So somebody said, could you not do her a shawl? And I asked her about it and she said, yes, I'd like a shawl. Well, that's, you know, that's completely new to me. I didn't realize that she would have wanted it. So I think the next thing that I do after the 2 projects that I'm working on now is going to be a shawl for her. And I've asked her what she wants. And we only had this conversation yesterday. So I said, think about it. And then we can start to work towards that design. But in my mind, I want to do something that's very flowery. You know, lots and lots of blossoms. That's what I'd like to do. Whether she'll go for that, I don't know. But I like these sorts of colours. You know, me, I like the blue and white. But whether she'll go for it, I don't know.
Well, since we start talking about Mrs. Smith, let's talk about her role in your YouTube channel, in your knitting, like how supportive she is. I know there is like a jokingly nickname for her that you call her knitting widow. How much truth it is in that?
Yeah, well, the knitting widow is something that obviously she's not a widow that knits. She's a widow to knitting.
Right.
And I do knit all the time. You know, every day I knit. And if we go somewhere, you know, if we go, she would like to go for a nice romantic walk on the beach, but I take my knitting. If we go out for dinner, yeah, I've got some knitting in my pocket. If we go out, you know, to a restaurant, I've got knitting with me. I take it with me everywhere. So yeah, so to a certain extent, you know, she is a widow to knitting because, you know, she doesn't get my full attention. But then, you know, over the years, I've got 4 kids and loads of grandchildren, and I'm always sitting waiting in the car, and it's lovely to have, you know, something to do when you're sitting waiting for, you know, a tennis lesson to end or whatever. But you know, that's historical. How in terms of the YouTube channel, she's in the background, and I think people are aware of her, which is, you know, it's a really weird thing that somebody that's not ever on camera, and she doesn't want to be on camera, but she's always there in the background. She's always a peripheral thing, and she has this yarn allergy, and or she believes she has a wool allergy. It's never been tested, but as soon as I get my knitting out, she'll start sneezing, and it's, you know, and I talk about things like that on my YouTube channel, and people think, oh, you know, people feel sorry for her, you know, having a husband that's like really committed to knitting, and her with a wool allergy and things like that. So we kind of play on that a bit in our YouTube videos, and people seem to like it, I think. Yeah.
Have you ever gotten negative reaction from other people being a male knitter? Like, have you ever been judged for knitting in public?
I think I've always knitted in public since I used to, as a student, I'd be knitting on the tube in London. I don't think I've ever had a negative reaction. In, you know, most of the time it's very positive. And the only thing is, I think you probably get too much attention. You know, if I'm knitting somewhere, you know, quietly minding my own business, you know, I might get lots of people, you know, during a period of time come up to me and strike up conversation. So it's a good thing in a way, I think, probably. You know, I talk to a lot of people because I knit. So
can you imagine your life without knitting in it?
Yeah, there was a time there was a really busy work period for me, which was at the beginning of this century. So from about 2000 to 2010, you know, give or, I mean, I would still probably have been knitting, but not very much. But just because I was working so hard, I had my own business, and also where I live, because I live in the bottom left-hand corner, right at the tip of England. And so I was working all around the country and coming home to see the country. I was working abroad, I was working in Ireland, Scotland, I was working you know, all over. So I wasn't getting home very much. And yeah, that kind of lifestyle didn't sort of fit in with knitting too much. So I might have, you know, when I came home for a week or whatever, I might have done a bit of knitting, but for a long while I didn't really knit. And so it only really for me took off again probably when I started on Instagram in about 2014, and I didn't realize that I was doing anything different to anybody else until then.
Right. I mean, what's Instagram for you? Like, is it a source of new ideas, inspirations, like new friendships? What do you use it for?
Well, I suppose initially I started just putting, you know, pictures of what I was working on there, and yeah, very quickly my following grew, and I was surprised. And then you get this, you know, this thing where people start asking you questions. I don't, since I've been YouTubing, I don't, is YouTubing a thing?
I guess.
Since I've been YouTubing, I don't think I've Instagram's become secondary to me, really. I don't know. Were you big
I
on
find
Instagram?
the same. I find that like I spend less time on Instagram because I'm so busy with the YouTube.
Yeah, that's probably it. But for me, yeah, I do follow that. There are a lot of people that I follow that I find inspiring. Yeah, and they're not all knitters, but there are lots of. I mean, there are lots of great knitters. And obviously you big those sorts of people up on your channel because you're talking to, you know, some great people, but yeah, on my channel as well, I try to share, you know, I think I say to people, oh, this, you know, this person's great, you really ought to follow this person, to the people on my channel as well. So yeah, whether it actually changes, I think I'm too set in my ways now to go off in any, you know, for somebody to turn me off into their direction, turn me in their direction. But yeah, I do, you know, it is great to see, oh, the sun's going in now, which is better, I think, I hope. Yeah, it is great to see what some people are doing out there. It's great, love it.
Well, do you have the ambition or like a dream about business side of your knitting now? Like now that you're putting the patterns out, now that you're doing the YouTube channel, like is there a business plan for it?
I don't have a business plan at all, no. In actual fact, it's all been it's totally unplanned what I'm doing. And yeah, I started putting the patterns out, and then people were saying, oh, you need to put them on Ravelry, because I don't want a poster, I want a digital download. And so I went on Ravelry and I put that chart on Ravelry. And now I've got a backlog, because people are saying to me, oh, we want this pattern, can you put it on Ravelry? And are you going to chart up this pattern? It's like the hair pattern. People were a bit, you know, they're saying to me, and all of it, I've got this sort of huge you know, demand, but there's only one of me. So, you know, and also I'm still working, you know, I work I work as a graphic designer for a sign company, and I work 2 or 3 days a week. I've reduced that down. In actual fact, I've asked them if I could reduce it down when, you know, things started to sort of kick off. I suppose eventually it might be that, you know, this does become my full-time job, and I'd like that. I would like that. Yeah.
You ever have fear of like what's gonna happen if you stop posting, if you stop being a YouTuber, like if you disappear off Instagram? Will people come looking for you? Will anybody remember you? Like, do you have that?
No,
Do you
no, not
question
at
that?
all. No, not at all. Yeah, no, I'll have to try it. I'll have to do it for a month and see what happens. But yeah, no, that doesn't worry me at all. But yeah, I would like to grow it. It's just, you know, it's early days really. It's only, what are we in? Just started in March, so it's only like 4 months or something since I put my first pattern out. So I can't really complain. You know, very happy.
What are you working on like right now, besides like the next YouTube episode? What you planning to work on in the nearest future?
Are you talking about knitting wise? Because
Or
I'm current.
art, or both, like everything.
Oh, okay. So I'm currently working on 2 projects which I'm knitting, which is off piece, which is complete. I'm making it up as I go along. So I don't know if you can see that very well because it's got stripes across it. But so this is completely, there's no plan to this. It will be a vest, but I just, every row, I just, there's nothing planned. There's nothing written down. And that's my first thing. So that's what I call off-piece knitting. And the other side of what I do is what I'll have to do is I'll have to show you Atlas's blanket. Atlas is my grandson, and I did this blanket for him. It's a huge blanket, and people have asked for the pattern for it, but it's much too complex. I could issue the pattern for it, but because you're carrying the yarn, unless you were using the process that we were talking about earlier, because you're carrying the yarn for hundreds of stitches at a time without changing the color, unless you're using that process, I'm sure there's people that are competent enough to do it, you know, with floats every 6 stitches, but I'll just get rid of that. So and I don't know if you can see it. Can you see the hair? It's huge, but
Yeah, just lift it a little bit higher.
a little bit. Tell me when. Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, so that's Atlas's blanket. So what I'm doing now is I'm working on a smaller version of that, and I've got this aim in my mind that if I start to do these picture knits at a set size, which is the width of a vest, so if that becomes my standard size for the blankets, then I can then use them as vest patterns as well. So that's what I'm trying to do with all of my, well, that's what I'm thinking in my head might be where I'm going with all of this, that I make, you know, something that can be knitted as something else. So in actual fact, they could be a shawl, they could be a you know, a jumper or whatever.
So on the Atlas's blanket, there is a word kiss, and it's not a random word. It's actually his last name, right?
That's right, yes.
So you mentioned that you have 4 daughters.
I have 4 daughters, and 2 of those daughters are married to brothers. And those brothers, their surname is Kiss. So yeah, my daughters are Kisses, and my grandchildren are Little Kisses.
Great.
Yeah, yeah, it's not it's quite a rare name. Yeah. So,
what are their reactions to all your knitting? Like, are they bragging about you to all their friends?
no, not really. I don't think I don't think, I think that they're surprised at, you know, how quickly or how many people watch my YouTube videos. I think they are surprised at that.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think they're expecting, you know, them to be quite as watched as they are. So I think they're surprised by that. But I don't think that yeah, you know, they've got their own lives and their own stuff. They do like them when, you know, when I give them the baby blankets, but then I borrowed them all back for YouTube videos. So they're all around me now. So all the kids are cold because they haven't got their blankets.
Well, I mean, you knit since you were a child. Like, what happens to majority of things that you knit? Is it all staying in the family? Do you gift it to others? Do you sell it? Like, what happens to stuff you knit?
So yes, it all stays within the family. I don't knit anything. I did for a while in the 90s, in the late 90s. I was knitting big blankets. I've got a couple here actually. So I was doing a lot of sort of intarsia stuff, and it was abstract. It was sort of seascape based, abstract painting type things. So this is one of those. So, and I was selling these. So I was buying lots of like secondhand yarn, and I was running lots of colours together. And then I was making big.
That's beautiful.
That and this one, which is a bit plainer. And I borrowed these back off my sister-in-law, who I was talking about earlier, who does have quite a big collection of my stuff. So just very plain, really, but big needles, running lots of yarn together, so it's quite thick. And so I was selling those, but it wasn't really viable financially. You know, if I was charged myself out an hourly rate, yeah, the income would have been quite low. But I was still working. I was working full time and just doing that in my spare time. So it was just a bit of fun, really. But apart from that, no, I don't sell anything that I knit.
Is it hard for you to like price the patterns, just because the amount of time, like if you actually think about how much time and effort went into creating a pattern, it's like you can't put money cost on it.
I think because initially because I thought, have you got one of my posters there, Joe? There she is. She's always on hand.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith.
Say hello, Joe.
Hello.
So this is one of my, can you see that that's a chart?
Yep.
Yeah. So this is my cat chart. So initially when I started, because I thought, well, you know, because I would never go on Ravelry. I would never buy a digital download myself. And so when I started doing these charts, I thought, no, I want to make them into nice things, you know, so that you know, so I sign them. And because, you know, coming from an artist side, you know, where I sell prints, you know, that signed prints myself anyway, I thought, well, I can put the two together. So, you know, they're just nice big prints that you can work from, and then you can stick it on the wall. So the pricing of those, I already knew how I would price them. So they're much more expensive by the time you've paid for that in a tube, because it costs about, is it about $12 or something just to send that to the USA. And then you've got the price of the print on top. So they're much more expensive than a digital download from Ravelry. But then people have got something real, you know. So I suppose in a way, it's not like I'm making lots of money out of them, not at all. But yeah, I was able to price those originally because of, but yeah, when you go, you know, I think sometimes I think, oh yeah, you know, designers that don't sell many of something, it must be heartbreaking. But yeah, it's, for me, when I started, and I've only just started, it's just come out of a hobby really. So it's not my full-time job. So
how do you view YouTube? Like, were there any surprises for you? Is there like favorite part of it for you, or least favorite that you wish somebody else would do for you?
well, I was hoping that that my kids would help, and I think I hoped for a long time that that would be the case, but they've got their own, you know, they've got their own stuff to be getting on with. So I had to teach myself how to video edit and all of those sorts of things. And although I actually, because I work as an illustrator and graphic designer during the day, but so you know, I'm used to doing stuff on the computer, but it's a bit, it's that learn, you know, you're daunted by that learning curve, and you know, I didn't know how to do, we didn't know how to do anything, and we've only been doing it for what, 6 weeks. But 6 weeks ago, Joe had never held a camera, and I'd never done any video editing, and now we are 7 or 8 videos we've got out now. So yeah, but it is massive learning curve, because I know that they're very basic what I do, you know, they're very just me talking, you know, and I do intend to improve things, and this lighting, all this sort of stuff, you know. So yeah, what's been a surprise more than anything is how quickly you know, people have come on board, you know, and how much interaction we've had, because I come down in the morning, and that can be a struggle sometimes, you know, if you've got 20 or 30 questions, that can be a real struggle, because I want to respond to them all, you know.
Well,
so,
I mean, so the question that I keep often thinking is, will we see Mrs. Smith on the camera sitting next to you one day?
that's one for you. Will we ever? I think in the next episode, I call to walking around in the garden, because we do this section called Travels with My Yarn, which is a reference to Graham Greene's book Travels with My Aunt. But we do Travels with My Yarn, and because we live in a really beautiful place, we just go around and, you know, we don't go, and we just do what we would normally do, which is go to the beach and have a walk and stuff like that, and we take the camera with us. But this week, because it's been really busy, we just did a little bit of us in the garden, and I've just caught her walking around in the background, but I don't think you can see her face. But I don't think she'll ever. She just sits there, and she tells me if I say anything untoward, she'll she hasn't today, by the way.
I would like to send the open invitation to the knitting widow to be a guest of my channel and talk about how it is to be a wife of the knitwear designer and YouTuber.
Yeah.
And an artist.
She's smiling. She's smiling. Yeah. She's moan. Yeah. Did you hear her? Could you hear her? She said,
No.
"Yeah, I could sit there and moan." She said.
Well, thank you so much for being my guest today. I really enjoyed talking to you and getting to know you better and seeing the way you think and how you create those beautiful pieces of art that I call wearable art.
Thank you very much. It's been great. Loved it.
And I'm going to put all the information, how to find your YouTube channel and how to find you on Instagram and everywhere, so people can subscribe to your channel and ask some questions about what you do.
Okay, thank you very much.
Goodbye.